Welcome to Stochastic Agency. My name's Brian, and today I'm going to ask, what does meta even mean to you? Have you ever been playing a D&D game and someone blurts out, "We need to hit the troll with fire," and the GM just sighs? Or maybe you've heard an esports commentator shout about a massive meta shift. So what does meta mean, and what are they all talking about, and why does it cause so many arguments? The answer to me is a lot more interesting, and it starts with a 2,000-year-old historical accident. You see, the word meta comes from a simple Greek preposition, which means after or with. It was used as a prefix for change, like in metamorphosis. So how does it become this loaded term in gaming? Well, we can thank a roughly 1st century BC librarian. You see, they were organizing the works of the philosopher Aristotle. And after Aristotle's books on the natural world called the Physics, there was a collection of untitled writings. So the librarian, being practical, just labeled them ta meta ta physica, literally the works that came after the physical works. But here's the twist. The content of those books was about things that are beyond the physical world, the nature of reality, existence, a being. Later scholars mistook the librarian's shelf label for a description of the content, and that meant beyond. And so the field of metaphysics was accidentally born. This new, powerful meaning caught on and quickly took off. Meta became a prefix to describe a field that is about another field. So for example, metacognition is thinking about thinking. In the digital world, metadata is data about data. In every case, meta means looking at something from a higher, more abstract level. It's about the thing itself. And that's the crucial idea that brings us to gaming. So we've got a word that means beyond or about. When we apply it to games, we get metagaming, a game about the game. But why is it that this idea is so controversial and manages to stick around? Well, it turns out metagaming means completely different things depending on who you ask. The two faces of metagaming. So we learned that meta means about the thing itself. So metagaming should be simple, right? It's just playing a game or talking about a game, but why is it a dirty word at the table and a key to victory in esports? It's because the term has two totally different faces. The first face is the one that we commonly talk about in tabletop role-playing games. We can label this as player knowledge intrusion. This is the classic, often negative definition of a player using that knowledge that they possess, but the character shouldn't, to influence decisions. This is very commonplace. The most famous example is knowing a monster's weakness from reading the rule books or knowing the end to a module. The player knows a troll is weak to fire, so their character, a novice adventurer, so to speak, who's never seen one, suddenly becomes an expert in troll biology. Now, this is often seen as negative because it can break the so-called effort to obtain immersion and ruin the fun of discovery for everyone at the table. You're not role-playing your character's journey. You're just manipulating the game's rules to get an advantage. Now, the second face, dominant in competitive games, is what's known as optimal strategy adherence, or simply the meta. Here the word is often jokingly interpreted as an acronym for most effective tactics available. You see, it's the collective, evolving wisdom of the entire player community about which characters, strategies, or builds are the most powerful. So for example, in a card game, the meta is the handful of top-tier decks you're most likely to face off against. In a MOBA, it's the characters who are considered the strongest in the current patch. Now, far from being cheating, the understanding, using, and even predicting of changes in the meta is the absolute highest level of strategic play in those cases. In a tabletop role-playing game, it could be considered the builds that are the most strongest, given the available material in use. This is the game about the game where analytical skill and adaptation are king. So we have two rough definitions, one seen as cheating, the other seen as peak strategy. This is naturally going to lead us to a debate. Is metagaming good or bad? And the arguments are, in my opinion, a little bit more nuanced than most people take them as. Is metagaming good or bad? So far we've seen that metagaming can mean breaking immersion by using player knowledge, or it can mean mastering the highest level of strategy. So which one is it? Is metagaming a problem to be stamped out or punished, or is it a skill to be celebrated? So parts of the arguments go like this. The case against metagaming centers around, most often, three main points. First, we see that it breaks immersion, that thing everybody wants to go for. It shatters the magic circle of play and reminds everyone that the world isn't real and spoils the fun of discovery. The second, in competitive games, is where a dominant meta can stifle creativity. When everyone knows the optimal, players feel pressure to use the same characters and strategies, making gameplay evolve into something that can feel stale and repetitive. This is often referred to as optimizing the fun out of the game. This last one, the third, is the pressure created by toxic communities and behaviors where when players experiment with off-meta choices, get bullied or harassed for not correctly playing the game. But there's a strong case for metagaming too. Recently, tabletop role-playing games have developed a so-called collaborative storytelling label as a game, or at least as part of the game. This makes sense, and some metagaming becomes essential. We could label this as constructive or social metagaming. Now, for example, when players coordinate during creation to make sure that the party has a healer, that's metagaming. It's a decision based on game design and mechanics. It's done to ensure the group can survive. Another example is a player choosing to have their loner character stick with the party because that player knows that splitting the party is bad and unfun for the game. In complex games, the meta makes complex systems accessible, giving a clear starting point for new players instead of making them feel overwhelmed. So is there a verdict? For me, the truth is, metagaming isn't inherently bad or good. Its value depends entirely on one thing. Why are you playing? The conflict for me is really a clash of unstated expectations. But what if the game itself was designed to be meta? That's where things can really get interesting. The meta is a feature, not a bug. So far, we've treated metagaming as a player behavior to be managed or punished. But what happens when the game developers stop seeing the meta as an accident and start building it directly into their games as a core feature? This is where we get to see the rise of the developer-designed meta progression systems, intentionally designed to exist as a layer on top of core gameplay. The clearest examples are found in roguelike video games, where each failed run earns you a persistent currency to buy permanent upgrades. This is the game between the games, which becomes a focus of reward. But this design isn't just for video games. It's a powerful philosophy that's made its way into tabletop RPGs too. Take Blades in the Dark. That game has a flashback mechanic that lets you retroactively say you planned for something. Need a getaway car? You can spend a resource to have a flashback to when you bribed a driver and stashed the car nearby. This turns what would have been a disruptive metagaming action in another system into a core creative tool that reinforces the theme of being a hyper-competent scoundrel. An even more striking example is the GM-less game Fiasco. The entire game is a meta conversation about collaboratively creating a story of a plan gone disastrously wrong. During the setup, players don't create characters in isolation. They use dice to collaboratively build a web of relationships and needs that connect everyone, a pure meta negotiation of the ingredients. The central mechanic is a direct negotiation of narrative authority called establish versus resolve. On your turn, you can either establish a scene, control the setup while other players decide the outcome, or you can resolve it, where they set up the scene, but you control the outcome. The game is an explicit turn-by-turn meta conversation about who has creative control. Developers now purposely designing the game about the game into the game. And this just shows that it's become a kind of central part of playing the game about the game. Our journey began with a simple question: what is the meta? And we've traveled from ancient Greece to the modern esports arena, and now it's time to kind of bring it all home and put it on the gaming table. So for a recap, meta started as a word meaning after, but historically a mistake gave it the meaning of beyond. This evolves into the modern sense of being about its own category. And this dual meaning and dual history is mirrored in metagaming. In role-playing games, it's often about the transcending of a game's reality by using player knowledge. In competitive games, it's a self-referential analysis of the game's system to find the best strategy. The constant arguments about metagaming, to me, really aren't about the act itself. They're just proxy wars over the purpose of play. Is the goal for you to have so-called immersion, or is it tactical victory? When these two types of goals clash without being discussed, you start to burn up some friction. So what's the solution, or a possible solution? Is it banning metagaming, which is impossible? No. The solution is metacommunication, communicating about communication. The healthiest gaming groups are those that talk openly about game expectations. This is the power contained in a session zero. It is the dedicated time to have a meta conversation and build a social contract. Talk about the kind of game that you want to play. They discuss what kinds of metagaming are cool and what kinds are not. The use of safety tools is just a form of meta communication. Lines and veils set content boundaries. By making the unspoken contract spoken, you build the trust that allows for an engaging experience. And my goal is not to stop metagaming. It's to get people to agree on how to metagame together better. So the next time the debate around metagaming breaks out or you see a video on YouTube, take a moment to understand that it might just be about the purpose of play. What are your table's rules for metagaming? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to dislike, like, or subscribe at your discretion, and take a minute to think about the game while you're using the game to talk about the game.